I thought I would just talk a little bit about an alternative to doing the feathers, which is just applique. You know, for some people, a lot of stitch isn't practical. So the easiest thing to do is just to cut a shape, a feather-like shape, out of a piece of cloth. And what I like to do is, whenever I'm doing a ragged edge, which is really perfect for a feather, I like to wash it first to give it a natural edge. So what I usually do is just stitch it to the cloth and then just throw this whole piece in the washer and dryer to fluff it up a little bit. And it's good because you're sewing the little piece down, otherwise you'd probably lose it. And usually when it's attached to something, it gets more braided. So I've done that one here, and you can see it already has a really beautiful frayed edge. And it's a little piece of linen. I mean, normally if you wash and dry something, you get kind of a natural edge and it doesn't fray any further. And then you can go forward. I have some methods for both turned and ragged applique if you want to look at those. You can just sew very close to the edge here, and then you could decorate it with stitch. You could take it a little further. You know, I do like a seam. You know, just a plain piece of cloth with a seam makes a nice feather base. And what I've done here is just what I call fake piecing. You just fold a piece of cloth. I actually even use the machine here to sew a little seam, and then you can turn it out and you've got your seam, and then you simply cut your shape out so that the seam runs down the middle. And again, you can apply that to cloth. You could turn it, or you could use your ragged method, and you can decorate it. Actually, Jeannie sent me one already where she actually used two colors and just used dots to decorate. So again, that's a very simple alternative. But if you want to take it a little further, a while back I did some feathers using stripes. And this is kind of a, well, I mean, if you want to just use a basic stripe, all you have to do is get yourself any stripe and cut yourself a square or something close to it. Now, I'm not using any straight edge or anything. You could use a mat and a cutting board if you want a really straight line. Now you just cut it diagonally like that, and then just flip it. And as soon as you do that, you get this kind of V pattern. And then you can just put the right sides together and either sew it on the machine or sew it by hand. And I have a couple of videos about piecing if you want to look at those. You know, I'm not really opposed to a machine. It is what it is. I mean, for something simple like this, for some people who have trouble stitching with their hands, a machine is a great option for something like this. But then to get a tip on it even gives it more interest. So I've done one over here. All you want to do is, before you sew them together, just take a little snip off the end of each one. Again, I'm not bothering with straight here. And then you just want to find a couple little scraps that are big enough to put on the ends. And you'll just sew a seam and turn them outward, both of them. I've done one over here. I actually used the one of the ties that I tied up the tomatoes with and cut it into small pieces. This is from last year. These happen to be pomegranate dyed. And then you want to trim them off. I've done this one. You can see sometimes if you don't do a great job, I'm going to take it over here and just use a straight edge for this. These rotary cutters are also really good for anybody who has trouble with a scissor. Of course, it's good if they're sharp, which obviously mine aren't. Okay, so you get the idea here. What you end up with is, you know, you'll just want to match that point, or even if it's slightly off. You know, feathers are sometimes slightly offset. And again, you'll just put them together, match the points, and sew a seam. And then when that's sewed together, you'll just cut your feather out so that you have a tip. Now you can draw it first or do it freehand, whatever you like. I mean, the good thing about these is, first of all, they're really fun, and you can use any kind of stripe. You know, you can get all kinds of patterns. You can use 2 different stripes, but you can get a bigger feather. You know, when you're stitching with that wrap stitch, you know, this long a stitch becomes a little bit impractical, and if you're going to use it for a quilt like I am, the stitch may pull. And you can compose with these, and I mean, I suppose you can even combine them with the stitched version. But you know, and if you're gonna turn them, which you can, make sure it's a little bit larger. I mean, if you try to work with something too small, it'll be too much. So a lot of times what I do is I just kind of draw the shape inside if I'm going to applique, and then I have a line to turn against. So I'll stitch some of these up and show you some variations.